Today we're breaking down the psychology of money, and I'm going to show you the 16 rules from this book that can instantly change the way you think about money in 2026. No theory, no fluff, just the lessons that actually matter for your life right now. In the next few minutes, you're going to learn why no one is crazy with money, including you, how luck and risk secretly control your results, why never enough is the most dangerous mindset today, the real power of compounding, and why most people break it, why getting rich is one skill but staying rich is a completely different one. Why a few tails can change your entire financial life. What freedom really means in a money driven world. Why the man in the nice car isn't who you think he is. Why wealth is invisible. Why saving beats return chasing. Why being reasonable beats being rational. And why you're not alone in any of this. These are the ideas that separate people who build wealth from people who stay stuck. So let's not waste time. Let's get into it. 1. No one's crazy. When it comes to money, people don't act logically, they act based on their personal experiences. And those experiences vary massively from person to person. Someone who grew up during a financial crisis will naturally be more cautious because their reference point is loss and instability. Someone who grew up in a period of economic growth will usually be more optimistic because everything around them suggested that risks pay off. Two people can look at the exact same financial situation and come to completely different conclusions. One might see an investment as an opportunity, the other might see it as a threat. And both decisions make sense when you consider the background they come from. Morgan Housel summarizes this idea by saying that your personal experience represents an incredibly small fraction of all financial history, yet it shapes the majority of your beliefs about how money works. In other words, you make decisions based not on facts, but on what you've lived through. This is why it's important not to assume others are making bad decisions just because they don't act like you would. They're not crazy. They're simply responding to what their life has taught them. Understanding this helps you avoid unnecessary judgment, comparison, and frustration. It also helps you understand your own behavior. Many of your financial habits come from early influences, not from careful analysis. The key point is simple. People aren't irrational. They are just shaped by different experiences, and what makes sense for one person may not make sense for another. 2. Luck and risk. In financial outcomes, it's impossible to separate skill from randomness. People often believe success comes purely from hard work and good decisions, while failure comes from mistakes. But in reality, luck and risk play a huge role on both sides. Take the example of Bill Gates. He was extremely intelligent and hardworking, but he also happened to attend one of the only high schools in the world that had a computer in the late 1960s. That opportunity gave him a huge head start. If he had been born in a different town or attended a different school, the outcome could have been completely different. The same applies to negative outcomes. A person may follow a responsible investing strategy, save consistently, and still lose money because of an unexpected crisis, illness, or market crash. They may have done everything right, yet still face a bad result. Morgan Housel emphasizes that nothing in finance is 100% skill or 100% fault. There is always an element of probability involved, and people often underestimate how powerful that randomness can be. This means a few important things. When you achieve good results, stay humble. You weren't in control of everything. When someone else fails, avoid jumping to conclusions. They may have faced risks you never dealt with. And most importantly, design a financial plan that can still survive when luck goes against you. Understanding the role of luck and risk helps you become more realistic, more empathetic, and more prepared. It reminds you that outcomes don't always reflect the quality of decisions. Sometimes they simply reflect timing and circumstances. 3. Never enough. One of the biggest financial traps people fall into is the constant shifting of their goals. No matter how much they earn, save, or achieve, they move the target further away. This creates a cycle where they never feel satisfied, even if they are objectively doing well. For example, someone might think earning $50,000 a year would solve all their problems. When they get there, they decide they need $80,000. When they reach that, they want $120,000. And the cycle continues. The desire for more keeps increasing, and the feeling of security never arrives. This problem isn't limited to ordinary people. It also affects high-profile individuals and even billionaires. Many cases of financial scandals or excessive risk-taking come from people who were already extremely wealthy, but felt the need to compete with others or prove something. Their decisions weren't driven by necessity, but by comparison and ego. Morgan Housel argues that knowing what enough means is one of the most important financial skills because without it, your decisions become irrational. You take unnecessary risks. You compare yourself to people with completely different situations, and you sacrifice stability for the sake of chasing something that keeps moving. The idea of never enough matters because it pushes people to take risks they don't need to take. It creates stress and dissatisfaction, even among those who are already financially secure. And it prevents people from appreciating what they've already achieved. The key message is simple. If you don't define what enough means, the goal will always move further away. And if the goal never stops moving, no level of income, success, or wealth will ever feel satisfying. 4. Confounding compounding. Compounding is one of the most powerful forces in finance, but also one of the most misunderstood. People tend to focus on finding the highest possible return, when in reality, the biggest driver of long-term wealth is simply time. Enjoying the video? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and join a community of people who are done with shortcuts and ready to play the long game together. Welcome to Freenomics. Let's keep building. The idea is straightforward. When your money earns returns, and those returns start earning more returns, the growth becomes exponential. But this exponential effect only appears after years of consistency. In the beginning, the progress is slow, almost unnoticeable, which makes many people lose patience. A good example is Warren Buffett. He's considered one of the greatest investors of all time. But what most people don't realize is that the vast majority of his wealth came after he turned 60. This wasn't because he suddenly became a better investor. It happened because he had already been investing for decades. Time was the multiplier. The problem is that most people quit too early. They invest for a short period, don't see dramatic results, and assume the strategy isn't working. In reality, they stopped right before compounding would have started accelerating. Morgan Housel argues that good investing isn't about getting the highest returns. It's about getting good returns for the longest possible time. Consistency matters far more than intensity. This has a few practical implications. You don't need to beat the market, you need to stay invested. Small gains repeated over decades are more powerful than big gains that don't last. Interrupting compounding by panic selling, switching strategies constantly, or stopping contributions destroys long-term potential. The key message is simple. Compounding rewards people who are patient, disciplined, and consistent. Its real effect only becomes visible with time, which is why long-term thinking is one of the strongest financial advantages you can have. 5. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy require two completely different mindsets. This is one of the core ideas of the book, and one of the most overlooked principles in personal finance. Getting wealthy usually involves taking risks, trying new things, being optimistic about the future, and pushing forward even when the outcome is uncertain. Entrepreneurs, investors, and high achievers often succeed because they bet on themselves and take action when others hesitate. But staying wealthy demands almost the opposite behavior. It requires caution, humility, and an understanding that things can go wrong at any moment. People who preserve their wealth long term are not the ones who chase every opportunity. They're the ones who consistently avoid catastrophic mistakes. Morgan Housel explains that most people underestimate the importance of survival. Even the best strategy in the world is useless if you can't stay in the game long enough for it to work. This means that long-term success depends less on finding the perfect investment and more on avoiding decisions that can wipe you out. A few key principles come from this. Use leverage carefully. High rewards often come with the risk of total loss. Keep a margin of safety so unexpected events don't derail your plans. Avoid lifestyle inflation that forces you to maintain high income forever. Don't take risks that could cost you everything, even if the potential reward seems attractive. Warren Buffett summarizes this mindset with a simple rule. The first rule of investing is don't lose money. The second rule is never forget the first rule. The main lesson is clear. You need offense to build wealth, but you need defense to keep it. Long-term financial success depends on your ability to combine both: ambition to grow and caution to protect what you've already built. 6. Tails you win. In investing and in life, most of your success will come from a very small number of events. This idea is known as the tail effect. A handful of outcomes generate the majority of the results. For example, venture capital firms invest in dozens of startups knowing that most of them will fail. They don't need all of them to win. They just need one or two to succeed massively, and those few successes pay for everything else. Amazon's cloud division, AWS, is a good real-world example. The company has tried hundreds of projects, but AWS alone became so profitable that it justifies years of experiments that didn't work. Morgan Housel argues that this same principle applies to personal finance, careers, and even everyday decisions. You can be wrong multiple times and still be incredibly successful if you stay in the game long enough to benefit from those rare, high impact outcomes. But this also means something important. You must be comfortable being wrong sometimes because most small bets won't be extraordinary. It's easy to judge yourself for decisions that don't work out immediately. But the key is to keep going and keep positioning yourself for opportunities with big upside and limited downside. This concept encourages long-term thinking. Not every investment needs to perform brilliantly. Not every idea will turn into something significant. Not every decision pays off immediately. What matters is that your overall strategy allows you to benefit from positive outliers. The message is simple. You don't need constant perfection. You need exposure to opportunities that can fundamentally change your situation. A few big wins over a lifetime can outweigh countless small losses. Staying in the game long enough to hit those tails is one of the most important advantages you can create. 7. Freedom. Morgan Housel argues that the highest form of wealth isn't a large bank account, a luxury lifestyle, or status. The highest form of wealth is control over your time, the ability to decide how you spend your day without being forced by financial pressure. You can have a high salary and still feel trapped if your schedule, energy, and choices are controlled by your job or your financial obligations. On the other hand, you can earn less but experience far more freedom if you've built stability, reduced unnecessary expenses, and structured your life in a way that gives you flexibility. Freedom means being able to wake up and choose what to work on. Freedom means not depending on anyone's permission to take a break. Freedom means having enough financial security to avoid decisions based purely on desperation. This is why saving money and controlling your lifestyle are so powerful. They give you margin, space to make decisions on your own terms. Financial independence is not just about having a lot of money. It's about reducing the number of things that control your time. A few practical points come from this idea. The lower your fixed expenses, the easier it is to have freedom. Flexibility is often more valuable than prestige or luxury. A simple, sustainable lifestyle provides more long-term satisfaction than chasing status. Money is most valuable when it protects your time, not when it buys possessions. In the end, freedom is the real return on investment. It's the point where money stops being the goal and becomes a tool. A tool that allows you to live life according to your priorities, not according to obligations you can't escape. 8. The man in the car paradox. When we see someone driving an expensive car, wearing a luxury watch, or living in a big house, we often assume they're admired for it. The natural thought is, if I had that, people would respect me. But this assumption is almost always wrong. Morgan Housel explains that when people look at someone with a flashy lifestyle, they don't usually admire the person. They imagine themselves in that situation. They think about what their own life would look like with that car, that house, or that level of wealth. The attention doesn't go to the owner. It goes to the fantasy created in the observer's mind. This is what makes the man in the car paradox so important. People rarely think about you as much as you think they do. So spending money to impress others often fails because others aren't focused on you, they're focused on themselves. This principle matters for a few reasons. Trying to buy social approval is usually ineffective. Chasing status through material things can lead to overspending and financial stress. The satisfaction you expect from external admiration often never arrives. People respect character, confidence, and competence, not objects. Understanding this paradox helps you make better financial decisions. You realize that most status spending is based on a misunderstanding, the belief that people are paying close attention. In reality, they're busy thinking about their own lives. The takeaway is straightforward. Use money to improve your life, your comfort, and your long-term security, not to project an image. The respect you actually want comes from who you are, not from what you buy. 9. Wealth is what you don't see. One of the most misunderstood ideas about money is the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich is visible, wealthy is invisible. Rich is the car, the clothes, the house, the dinners, the lifestyle. Wealth is the money that wasn't spent, the savings, the investments, the financial cushion, the options for the future. Morgan Housel emphasizes that wealth is defined by things that don't show up in public. You can look wealthy on the outside while having no financial stability on the inside. And you can look average on the outside while quietly building real, long-term freedom. This misunderstanding creates problems for many people. They see others displaying luxury and assume that's what success looks like. As a result, they spend more to look successful without realizing that the very act of spending eliminates the wealth they're trying to signal. Some important points come from this. Wealth is the accumulation of assets, not the appearance of wealth. Every euro you save or invest increases your future freedom. Every euro you spend for status reduces the buffer that protects you. Quiet wealth is usually more durable than visible wealth. People who look extremely rich often have high expenses, high debt, and high pressure to maintain their image. This idea becomes even clearer when you consider long-term goals. It's the money you keep, the money that silently grows in the background, that eventually gives you the ability to retire early, take risks, change careers, or simply live without stress. The message is simple and practical. Don't judge wealth by appearance. Real wealth lives in the background, in savings, investments, security, and control over your life. 10. Save money without a specific reason. Most people only save money when they have a specific goal: a house, a car, a trip, or an emergency fund. But Morgan Housel explains that this mindset is limiting. In reality, one of the smartest financial habits you can build is saving, even when you don't have a clear purpose for that money. Why? Because life is unpredictable. Opportunities and problems rarely appear at convenient times. You don't always get advance notice before something important happens, whether positive or negative. When you save without a strict reason, you create flexibility. You give yourself options. You gain bargaining power. You reduce stress. You increase your ability to adapt quickly. This concept is known as optionality. The idea that having resources available gives you the ability to make better decisions when circumstances change. People often assume that saving is only useful for protection against bad events, but it also positions you to take advantage of unexpected opportunities. Investing during a market dip, switching careers, starting a business, moving cities, or saying yes to something that could improve your life. A few key insights come from this. You don't need a detailed plan for every euro you save. Money saved today becomes optionality tomorrow. Cash provides emotional security, not just financial security. Unexpected opportunities often require quick action, and only people with savings can act. A buffer gives you the freedom to avoid bad situations and the confidence to pursue good ones. Enjoying the video? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and join a community of people who are done with shortcuts and ready to play the long game together. Welcome to Freenomics. Let's keep building. Housel highlights that people who save aggressively, even without a specific goal, tend to handle uncertainty better and make smarter long-term decisions. They're not forced into choices by financial pressure. They can select the option that's best for their future, not the one that's simply available right now. The core message is simple. You don't need permission or a perfect plan to save. Save because the future is uncertain, and having resources available gives you both protection and opportunity. Saving without a reason is one of the most practical and underrated financial habits you can build. 11. Reasonable over rational. Many people believe that the key to financial success is following the most mathematically perfect plan. But Morgan Housel argues the opposite. The best financial strategy isn't the one that looks flawless on paper. It's the one you can realistically stick to over many years. In finance, rational means choosing the option that maximizes returns with no emotional influence. But humans aren't machines. We have emotions, fears, biases, stress, pressure, and personal circumstances. What is rational in a spreadsheet may be impossible to follow in real life. For example, putting 100% of your money into stocks may be rational mathematically, because historically, stocks give the highest long-term return. But for most people, that strategy is unrealistic. They panic during market crashes, sell at the wrong time, or lose sleep due to volatility. The rational strategy collapses the moment emotions take over. That's why being reasonable is more important than being perfectly rational. A reasonable plan acknowledges human behavior. It balances returns with emotional comfort. It accepts slightly lower performance in exchange for long-term consistency. And consistency is what actually builds wealth. A reasonable plan might include keeping extra cash even if the interest rate is low, just for peace of mind. Holding some safer investments despite knowing they won't grow as fast. Saving more than necessary because it helps you feel secure. Avoiding complicated strategies you don't understand, even if they promise higher returns. Choosing investments you can actually stick with during bad times. The key insight here is that the best plan is the one you won't abandon. A reasonable strategy that you follow for 20 or 30 years will always outperform the optimal strategy that you quit after a stressful moment. Morgan Housel points out that temperament, patience, discipline, and emotional control matter more than perfect analysis. A financial plan must fit your personality, your tolerance for risk, and your real life behavior. The message is simple. Don't aim to be perfectly rational, aim to be consistently reasonable. Because in the long run, consistency beats perfection. 12. You're not alone. When people think about their financial situation, they often assume it's entirely the result of their own decisions, their effort, their discipline, their intelligence, or their mistakes. But Morgan Housel reminds us that a huge part of anyone's financial life is shaped by factors outside their control. Where you were born, the decade you grew up in, the economic environment you entered the job market in, your family background, the examples you saw around you, and even pure luck all play a role in determining your opportunities and constraints. For example, someone who started their career during a recession faces a very different reality than someone who graduated during an economic boom. The first person might struggle to find stable work, while the second has access to promotions and opportunities simply because of timing. These differences have long-term effects on income, savings, confidence, and risk tolerance. This idea also explains why comparing yourself to others is often unhelpful. You might be comparing your situation to someone who had a completely different starting point, different support systems, different pressures, different economic cycles, and different chances. It's not a fair comparison, and it usually leads to frustration or unrealistic expectations. Understanding this helps in two ways. It reduces self-blame. You stop assuming every setback is your fault. It reduces judgment. You stop assuming that people who struggle are simply irresponsible. At the same time, Housel emphasizes that while many things are outside your control, there are still key variables you can influence, and these are what matter most over the long term. How much you save, how you manage risk, your spending habits, your willingness to keep learning, your consistency across time. Focusing on these controllable factors creates progress regardless of your starting point. The main message is simple. You're not behind because you're bad with money, and you're not ahead because you're uniquely gifted. Everyone is playing a different financial game shaped by circumstances they didn't choose. What matters is controlling what you can and building stability from where you are now. 13. Room for error, margin of safety. One of the most important concepts in financial planning is the idea of having a margin of safety, a buffer that protects you when things don't go as expected. Morgan Housel argues that the world is far more unpredictable than most people assume, which means your financial life needs room for mistakes, surprises, and unforeseen events. A margin of safety can take many forms. Keeping extra cash, avoiding excessive debt, using conservative projections, or maintaining lower fixed expenses. The purpose is always the same: to make sure that a single unexpected event doesn't force you into a bad decision or ruin years of progress. People often underestimate how quickly circumstances can change. Jobs disappear, markets fall, emergencies happen, opportunities arise suddenly and require immediate action. None of these moments follow your plans or respect your timeline. Without a margin of safety, you're vulnerable to shocks that you can't control. Housel emphasizes that not having a margin of error isn't just risky, it's unnecessary. You don't need to maximize every euro to succeed financially. You simply need to ensure that you stay in the game long enough for your long-term strategy to pay off. A strong margin of safety allows you to handle unexpected expenses without stress, avoid selling investments at the worst possible moment, make decisions based on logic instead of panic, take advantage of opportunities instead of missing them, maintain stability even during uncertain times. This concept also highlights an important psychological benefit: security. Knowing that you have a buffer makes it easier to stay calm, think clearly, and make better long-term choices. You avoid impulsive decisions because you're not under financial pressure. The central idea is simple. A margin of safety doesn't restrict you, it protects you. It acts as a shield that allows your strategy to survive the unexpected, which is ultimately far more valuable than squeezing out the maximum possible return. 14. The seduction of pessimism. Pessimism has a unique power in finance. It sounds smarter, more realistic, and more responsible than optimism. When someone warns about a market crash or an economic crisis, people tend to take it more seriously than someone who talks about long-term growth. This creates a bias where negative predictions feel more credible, even when they're not accurate. Morgan Housel explains that the reason pessimism feels so convincing is simple. Bad news happens fast while good news happens slowly. A market can fall 20% in a few weeks, but recovering that loss can take years. Because negative events unfold quickly and dramatically, they capture more attention and emotion. However, the long term history of the world, and whether economic, technological, or social, is overwhelmingly a story of progress. Markets rise over time, economies grow, innovation accelerates, and living standards improve. This progress happens gradually and quietly, which makes it much less noticeable than sudden downturns. The danger is that when you pay too much attention to pessimistic voices, you may end up making decisions that harm your long term results. Selling investments too early, avoiding opportunities, taking on excessive caution, or constantly trying to predict the next crisis. Housel's point is not that pessimism is never valid. Crises happen and risks are real. But the mistake is assuming that pessimism is a superior worldview just because it feels more serious. In reality, pessimism can paralyze decision making. It can make you overly risk averse. It can cause you to miss long term compounding. It can make temporary setbacks seem permanent. A balanced perspective acknowledges risks while still trusting that progress continues over time. The world has faced wars, recessions, pandemics, inflation, and countless crises. Yet long term growth has always reemerged. The message is clear. Short term pessimism may sound intelligent, but long term optimism tends to be right. Let the data guide your decisions, not the emotional weight of negative headlines. 15. You'll change. One of Morgan Housel's most important insights is that people underestimate how much they will change over time. Your goals, preferences, priorities, and risk tolerance at age 20 are often very different from what they are at 30, 40, or 50. Yet many people make long-term financial decisions assuming they will stay the same forever. This creates a common problem. You commit to plans, careers, investments, or lifestyles that no longer fit who you become later in life. What once seemed essential might one day feel irrelevant. What once felt safe might later feel limiting. And what once felt exciting might eventually become stressful. For example, someone in their early 20s may feel comfortable taking big risks, investing aggressively, or prioritizing career over stability. Years later, they may value security more, seek predictable income, or want flexibility to focus on family or personal projects. The person has changed, and their financial strategy needs to change with them. Housel calls this the end of history illusion. People can easily see how much they've changed in the past, but they struggle to imagine how much they will continue to change in the future. This leads to rigid planning, unrealistic expectations, and frustration when reality shifts. Understanding this principle helps in several ways. It encourages you to stay flexible with long term goals. It prevents you from locking yourself into commitments that don't allow adjustment. It reduces guilt or confusion when your interests evolve. It helps you design a financial life that adapts rather than breaks. It reminds you that changing direction is normal, not a failure. This concept is also a reminder to avoid overconfidence in long term predictions, including your own. Life circumstances change, opportunities appear unexpectedly, conditions shift, and most importantly, you change too. The key takeaway is straightforward. Your financial plan should leave room for your future self, a version of you who will have different priorities, different goals, and a different perspective. Flexibility is not a weakness. It's a recognition that growth is constant, and your strategy should evolve with you. 16, and the 16th and final point is titled Surprise, but the message is very straightforward. One of the biggest lessons in the psychology of money is that the most important events in finance are almost always surprises. They are the moments nobody predicts, and yet they have the biggest impact on markets, economies, careers, and personal finances. Think about the major financial shocks of the last decades: the dot-com crash, the 2008 financial crisis, the COVID pandemic, inflation spikes, sudden recessions, unexpected technological revolutions. Very few experts saw these events coming in advance, and even fewer understood how big the impact would be. Morgan Housel argues that this unpredictability is not an exception, it's the rule. The world changes faster than our models, forecasts, or assumptions. History is full of events that were considered impossible right up until the moment they happened. This has a major implication. Relying on precise predictions is dangerous. A financial plan based on the assumption that things will unfold exactly as expected is extremely fragile. One surprise can break everything. That's why it's important to build a strategy that can withstand unexpected events. A plan that works only if the future behaves perfectly is not a plan. It's a gamble. A few key insights come from this idea. Surprises are normal, they are part of how the world works. Markets don't crash when everyone expects them to, they crash when few are prepared. The biggest risks are the ones you don't see coming. Forecasts should always include a margin for uncertainty. Flexibility is more important than precision. This principle also challenges the idea that past performance can perfectly predict the future. Historical data can be helpful, but the next major event is unlikely to look like the last one. The world evolves and new factors appear that weren't relevant before. The message is simple and practical. You don't need to predict every surprise. You need to be prepared for the fact that surprises will happen. Build a financial life that can absorb shocks, adapt when things change, and continue moving forward even when the unexpected occurs. The goal isn't to eliminate uncertainty, the goal is to survive it. These 16 lessons are simple and powerful, but they only matter if you use them. Pick one, apply it, and let time do the rest. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and join a community of people who are done with shortcuts and ready to play the long game together. Welcome to Freenomics. Let's keep building.